Three men went into the British Columbia wilderness. They didn't leave notes, they didn't leave answers. And in every case, the search reached a point where the land gave nothing back. They were experienced. They had plans. They expected to come home. What followed were searches measured in days, then weeks, and questions that stretched into years. This second episode on missing men isn't about theories, but about what remains when the terrain erases direction and silence becomes the only constant. This is episode 28 and part 2 of Missing Without a Trace, Canadian Disappearances. The first case we examined was the disappearance of Gordon Sagoo. He lived in Surrey, British Columbia. He was 50 years old, a father, a life coach, and an endurance athlete, someone people trusted and leaned on. Those who knew him described him as calm and disciplined, a person who believed in preparation and responsibility. Gordon was not impulsive. He planned his time. He followed through on commitments. Running and hiking were not escapes for him. They were structure. He took up long-distance running in his mid-40s, went on to complete multiple marathons, and eventually made it his mission to help others transform their lives through fitness. Friends described him as strong, determined, resilient. "There isn't a powerful enough word to describe my uncle," his niece said during a press conference as the search intensified. When Gordon went into the outdoors, it wasn't spontaneous. He chose routes carefully. He paid attention to conditions. He told people where he was going and when he expected to return. That expectation mattered. On August 14, 2016, Gordon set out for what should have been an ordinary day hike near Baby Monday Peak, part of the Cheam Mountain Range east of Chilliwack. He was not alone at the start. Gordon was hiking with two friends, familiar faces, on terrain they knew well. Family members later emphasized that Gordon was an experienced hiker, comfortable in the area, and respectful of the environment. At some point during the hike, the group separated, with a clear plan to reconnect later at an agreed-upon meeting point. That meeting never happened. Gordon never showed up. Concern followed quickly. This wasn't someone who missed plans casually. Silence did not fit Gordon's habits. He was careful. He was communicative. This was not normal. Search and rescue was contacted. The Chilliwack Search and Rescue, the RCMP, and volunteers began combing the surrounding ridges and forests. Crews were first deployed late that Sunday night, with teams returning again early the next morning. Ground searchers worked through steep slopes and dense forest, while helicopters traced ridgelines and ravines from above. Early in the operation, SAR officials acknowledged the difficulty of the terrain. Dense forest limited visibility from the air. Thick undergrowth slowed ground teams. Ravines dropped sharply out of sight. One SAR manager told media crews were doing everything we can with the information we have, while noting how quickly the landscape resisted even coordinated efforts. The RCMP confirmed Gordon was considered experienced and capable, which made his disappearance especially concerning. The North Shore Search and Rescue was brought in with thermal imaging equipment, searching for heat signatures in case Gordon had taken shelter or was injured and unable to move. Despite days of intensive searching, nothing definitive was found. Officials stated they did not believe Gordon was prepared to stay out overnight, raising concerns about exposure. There was no sign he was sheltering, no gear recovered, and no clear accident site identified. East of the Fraser Valley, the landscape rises quickly. Roads narrow, pavement gives way to gravel, trailheads appear suddenly, pressed against forest walls. Within minutes of leaving a vehicle, visibility changes, sound is absorbed by trees, direction becomes difficult to judge. This is not distant wilderness. It sits close to towns and highways. But once inside it, the forest closes in fast. Even experienced hikers can lose orientation without realizing it. After more than a week, SAR managers conducted a full operational review. In a public statement, Chilliwack Search and Rescue explained that, and after consulting with teams from Kent Harrison, Coquitlam, and North Shore Rescue, they had reviewed all aspects of the search operation and presented recommendations to the RCMP. Active search operations were scaled back, not because Gordon Sagoo had been found, but because there were no new leads to follow. Throughout those early days, Gordon's family spoke publicly and emotionally about what they were enduring. "This has been one of the most agonizing and challenging times our family has gone through," his niece said, describing the pain of returning home each day without answers. Friends spoke about Gordon's transformation, how he went from struggling with his health to building discipline and purpose through endurance sports. His running became, as one friend described it, his mission in life to support others and help them achieve their fitness goals. A fundraising effort was launched, not to promote theories but to support search and rescue and keep attention on Gordon's disappearance while the search was still active. Eventually, the family released a statement thanking search and rescue teams and the wider community, saying they had received an overwhelming amount of support from family, friends, and the community. They emphasized they had not given up hope and were seeking closure, not speculation, but answers. Yet, despite thousands of volunteer hours and every available resource, nothing definitive was ever found. No pack, no clothing, no equipment, no sign of injury or a clear accident, no trace explaining where Gordon went after separating from his companions. Gordon Sagoo did not disappear from remote, untouched wilderness. He vanished from established trails in an area used regularly by hikers and runners, not far from roads and trailheads. A place familiar to people who explore it every year. Years passed. The case did not end. It changed. Gordon's name continued to appear in police appeals related to missing people in the Chilliwack backcountry. Authorities acknowledged that wilderness environments do not operate on investigative timelines. Evidence can remain hidden for years, sometimes revealed by changing conditions, sometimes by chance, and sometimes not at all. Within the search and rescue community, Gordon Sagoo's disappearance left a lasting impression. Years later, he was formally honored by the British Columbia Search and Rescue Association through a memorial fundraiser. Not as closure, but as recognition of the human weight behind every search that ends without answers. Gordon entered the British Columbia wilderness, experienced, prepared, and with the expectation of returning home. He told people where he was going. He planned his hike. He followed the practices meant to keep people safe. And still, he vanished. There was no final sighting, no recovered route, no single moment investigators could point to and say, "This is where everything changed." Only a vast, layered landscape, and the limits of what can be known once someone disappears into it. Years later, the question remains unanswered. What happened to Gordon Sagoo in the Chilliwack backcountry? The second case is Kristofer Shawn Couture, who was 25 years old when he disappeared. Kristofer grew up in Edmonton, Alberta. By his mid-20s, he had moved west to British Columbia for work, taking construction and roofing jobs across the Lower Mainland. It was a practical move, driven by opportunity, not escape. He worked physically demanding jobs, kept himself fit, and stayed in regular contact with his family. Nothing about his life suggested instability. Nothing suggested he was preparing to disappear. In late January 2019, communication stopped. For his family, the silence was immediate and unfamiliar. Calls went unanswered. Messages weren't returned. What initially felt like a delay soon became something heavier, something that didn't fit the pattern of who Kristofer was. The last confirmed sighting of Kristofer Couture did not occur in the wilderness. According to police, it happened in New Westminster. On January 26, 2019, he was seen leaving Royal Columbian Hospital. Authorities have not publicly disclosed why he was there. What matters is that after that moment, there are no verified records of where he went next. No confirmed sightings, contacts, or destination. The following evening, January 27th, a vehicle was noticed at a trailhead near Elk Mountain in Chilliwack. It was a blue 2003 Saturn Ion with Alberta license plates. The trailhead sits at the edge of steep, heavily forested terrain, an area where the landscape rises quickly, and visibility drops almost immediately beyond the path. The rear window of the car was smashed. At the time, the vehicle was not connected to a missing person investigation. Trailheads often have parked cars. No immediate alarm was raised. Kristofer's family had not yet been notified, and the discovery did not trigger a coordinated search. The car remained there, exposed to weather, time, and human traffic. Kristofer was not officially reported missing until May 17, 2019. By then, months had passed. Winter had given way to spring. Whatever early clues may have existed at the trailhead were likely already gone. Once the connection was made, attention shifted fully to the Elk Mountain area. Search and rescue teams, the RCMP, volunteers, and family members searched the surrounding terrain. Ground crews moved through forested slopes, ravines, and trail systems. Aerial searches scanned areas inaccessible on foot. The environment was challenging: thick vegetation, uneven ground, and terrain that offers countless places where a person could vanish from view. The searches found nothing: no clothing, personal belongings, equipment, or any confirmed tracks leading away from the trailhead. There was no indication that Kristofer returned to his vehicle. There was no evidence pointing clearly toward an accident, an intentional disappearance, or a criminal act. The landscape offered no explanation, only silence. As weeks passed, the investigation slowed, not because it was closed, but because there was nowhere left to go. Police later confirmed that Kristofer's phone had not been used since late January. There were no verified sightings, no confirmed movement beyond that final known day. Years passed. Chilliwack RCMP continued to classify Kristofer Couture as a missing person. In repeated public statements, police have acknowledged that very little new information has come forward since the early stages of the case. His disappearance remains open, unresolved, and active. In 2024, and again in 2025, Kristofer's name appeared in cold case appeals issued by Chilliwack RCMP, grouped with other people who vanished in the region's backcountry and were never found. It was a reminder that the case had not been forgotten, even if answers remained out of reach. For Kristofer's family, time did not bring closure. His mother continues to speak publicly. She marks birthdays that pass without him. She returns to British Columbia, retracing places tied to his last known movements. On the second anniversary of his disappearance, a forensic artist created an age-progressed image, not as evidence but as hope, a way of showing who Kristofer might be now, in case someone, somewhere, recognizes him. It is an effort to keep a face attached to a name that could otherwise fade into paperwork and archives. Kristofer Couture drove to the edge of British Columbia's wilderness and vanished. There is no confirmed route into the forest, no witness who saw him walk away from the car, no final message explaining what happened next. Only a trailhead at the edge of the trees, a shattered window, and a search that reached its limits without answers. More than 5 years later, the question remains unresolved. What happened after Kristofer Couture stepped out of his car? The final case we are looking at is about the disappearance of 29-year-old Timothy Marc Delahaye. He was from North Vancouver, the youngest of 9 siblings, and deeply connected to his family. His mother, Kathy Delahaye, described him as gentle, peaceful, and steady, not impulsive, not reckless, and not the kind of person who would simply walk away from his life. "He's not a criminal or a drug user or even a drinker," she said. "He's just such a super simple, sweet guy. He's just such a peaceful guy." On April 29, 2019, Timothy was last seen when a friend dropped him off on Frost Road in the Columbia Valley, south of Cultus Lake, near Chilliwack. That is the last confirmed sighting. Kathy said Timothy was on his way to a Buddhist retreat in Washington State, a place he had visited the year before. This time, she explained, he wanted to spend time in nature first. That detail matters, because it has often been misunderstood. The idea of a Buddhist retreat came directly from Timothy's family, not from speculation. But whether Timothy ever reached the United States has never been confirmed. After he was dropped off, Timothy did not come home. At first, Kathy assumed a delay. Backcountry travel can take longer than planned. Terrain is unpredictable, but as hours turned into days, worry turned into alarm. "His behavior is not like this at all," she said. "On Mother's Day, he didn't call me. It's not normal. We were very close." Then she said something that captured both her fear and her hope. "There's something wrong," Kathy said, "but I think I still hear his heart. I think he's still alive. I think he is hurt or lost." The RCMP issued a press release on May 21, 2019, formally listing Timothy as missing. 3 days later, Chilliwack RCMP spokesperson, Corporal Mike Rail, addressed the case publicly. "We are conducting an extensive investigation," he said. "Part of it is the search, and the area has been searched thoroughly." Chilliwack Search and Rescue was tasked with searching the Columbia Valley area. Search manager Doug Fraser said teams searched on Sunday and Monday, but found no sign of anyone hiking or camping. Most of the area in the Columbia Valley is privately owned, Fraser explained, so there is very little public or Crown land to search. The terrain itself presented challenges. The area is mountainous, heavily forested, and dense with bush. And without knowing exactly what Timothy's plans were, searchers had little to anchor their efforts. As part of the investigation, the Whatcom County Sheriff's Office in Washington State was notified, due to the possibility that Timothy may have wandered toward the border, but no confirmation ever emerged that he crossed into the U.S. One possible clue surfaced through residents who lived along Frost Road. George and Babs Snellgrove told Kathy they believed Timothy might have camped nearby. George said he saw a large tent on a landing near an old clear-cut on the day Timothy was dropped off. But when George later hiked back up to the area, he found no trail, no campsite, and no evidence that anyone had been there. The lead went nowhere. As days passed without answers, Kathy became increasingly desperate. She canvassed neighbors in the Columbia Valley herself. She went to the local newspaper. She begged for help. "What would you do if it was your son?" she asked. "I want someone every day out there looking." The family eventually offered a $5,000 reward for information leading to Timothy's safe return. Hoping that someone might know something but hadn't yet come forward, his sister, Joan Wolfe, shared the reward publicly. Despite search efforts, police investigation, and community outreach, nothing definitive was found. No backpack, clothing, confirmed route, or sign of injury. There was no evidence of a suicide, note, or permanent goodbye. Just a young man his mother describes as peaceful and kind, close to his family, with plans ahead of him, who stepped into the backcountry and never emerged. Years later, Timothy Marc Delahaye remains missing. Not because the case was ignored, not because no one looked, but because, in this case, the trail disappears, and nothing has yet taken its place. Three men, 3 disappearances, 3 searches that reached the same limit. These 3 men did not vanish in the same way. They did not go missing on the same day, or on the same trail, or for the same reasons. But in each case, the outcome was the same. Searchers went in, families waited, and eventually the land stopped giving anything back. British Columbia's wilderness is not hostile, but it is indifferent. It does not explain itself. It does not leave timelines or witnesses or closure. What remains are names, unanswered questions, and families living in the space between hope and acceptance. These stories are not about fear. They are about limits, of visibility, of certainty, of what can be known once someone slips beyond the edge of the map. If you hike here, you are never far from a road, but distance is not measured in kilometers. It's measured in how quickly direction disappears. For investigators, the question remains open. For families, the waiting continues. And for the rest of us, the responsibility is simple. If you saw something, if you found something, if you remember something that didn't seem important at the time, say something, because sometimes the only thing that breaks the silence is someone choosing to speak. All right, thanks for staying with us after that one. And just to say it clearly, this is part 2 of Missing Without a Trace, Canadian Disappearances. If you haven't heard part 1 yet, that's where this story really begins.
And even knowing this was part 2, this one still felt heavy once we finished researching and recording.
It did. The amount of people missing without a trace in the Canadian wilderness is not unique, although each is unique to the families. It is just more common than we thought.
There were more missing without a trace in the Chilliwack area, in BC and beyond. And we could have added more missing stories to this episode. I don't know if we could cover everyone missing in our national parks.
And finding information about the missing was difficult because they don't make national news. Much of the information comes from local papers, and it's families desperate for information.
Agreed, the information from the RCMP is more limited. There's location descriptions where the victim went missing, but not a lot more than that. I felt like I had more questions after our research.
I also felt defeated for the families. And I think part of why it felt like that is because this is 6 men now when we include the first episode. 6 people missing without a trace. 1 minute they were there, and the next minute they weren't.
Yeah, when you step back and look at part 1 and part 2 together, it really hits you. These are fathers, husbands, sons, and uncles, people special to their families and friends.
In the first episode, we talked about 3 men who disappeared from resort towns, places with staff, guests, cameras, places where someone should have been seen at some point.
And now it's 3 more men, but this time from the wilderness. Busy parks, popular trails, places people hike every day.
That's what makes it hard to process. These aren't remote, forgotten corners. These are places where other people were around, where someone should have crossed paths with them.
And somehow, in all 6 cases, that moment never shows up.
There's something else that really stayed with me while we were working on this episode. When you look closely at all 3 cases, none of these men disappeared in total isolation. There were people nearby, not right beside them, but close enough that it complicates the idea of someone just vanishing.
That part really unsettled me too, especially once you start lining up the details.
With Gordon, there were other hikers in the area that day. Cars in the lot, trails being used. He wasn't alone in some far-off, untouched wilderness.
And he wasn't reckless. He planned the hike. He told people where he was going. That's what makes it so hard to accept. That someone can do everything right and still disappear.
Exactly. Somewhere between being around other people and not being around them anymore, something happened. And nobody recognized it in the moment.
Kristofer's case is similar in a different way. Elk Mountain is busy, people come and go, it's not quiet out there.
And his car. I keep coming back to that car. It didn't disappear. It just sat there. People walked past it. Someone even broke into it later.
Which means someone must have seen something unusual.
And still, whatever happened to Kristofer happened without anyone realizing they were close to something important.
Timothy's case feels different again. There's no confirmed trail, no starting point. We don't even know where he was headed. There was someone that saw something, but it turned out to be nothing. It was thought he snuck into Washington State, but that also proved to be nothing.
That's the one that really stuck with me. There's no place to point to and say, that's where it started. His trail just disappears.
We have a desperate mom who just wants the police to investigate something to help the process of finding her son.
Then you have the rumors and the speculations online. And if you look online long enough, you see it. People guessing, filling in gaps.
But none of those theories are supported by police.
And that matters. Because when you strip the rumors away, what you're left with isn't a mystery missing one key clue. It's an environment that erased evidence before anyone realized it mattered.
A lot of speculation focuses on why someone would disappear, like it has to be a decision or a dramatic moment.
When all 3 cases point to something quieter, ordinary moments that turned irreversible without witnesses, a wrong turn, a slip, a misjudged distance.
And quiet moments don't produce witnesses.
I also want to talk about the images. While we were working on this episode, I spent time looking at photos of the areas where these men went missing. Trail photos, aerial shots, stuff you'd see on hiking blogs or tourism pages.
Same. And honestly, that changed how I felt about all of this.
Because none of those places look dangerous. They look calm, inviting even.
With Gordon, you look at photos of the Chilliwack River Valley and Vedder Mountain. Dense forest, but beautiful, green, peaceful.
And what really hit me was how close it all is to towns and roads. It's right there, not remote in the way people imagine.
The photos give you a false sense of security. A trail sign, a parking area, trees spaced just enough that you think you'd always know which way was out.
Until you zoom in and realize how quickly the forest thickens, how the ground drops, how shadows swallow everything between the trees.
Kristofer's photos were similar. Summit shots from Elk Mountain, blue sky, views, people smiling.
And then you think about that parking lot, that car. Somewhere between the photos people post and the tree line, something went wrong, and the landscape doesn't tell you where.
With Timothy, I didn't even know what to search for at first. There's no named trail. So I ended up looking at general images of the Chilliwack backcountry, forest roads, riverbanks, paths that barely look like trails anymore.
And you realize how many places there are where someone could just step off and be gone within seconds.
The photos don't show danger. They show stillness. And that somehow feels worse.
Looking at those images made one thing really clear to me. These aren't places that announce risk. They don't warn you.
They look ordinary, familiar, like places people trust.
And once you realize that, everything shifts. These men didn't disappear because they ignored obvious danger. They disappeared in places that look safe enough to let your guard down.
Before we wrap, if you're listening and this episode stuck with you, you can find us on social media. We post videos, case updates, and source links there, and we always read what people post. And if you share the show or follow along, it genuinely helps keep these stories visible.
These stories don't end cleanly, and maybe they never will, but they're not finished, not as long as someone is still paying attention. See you next Monday. Until then, take care of each other.